let's go ahead and get started. Welcome, everyone. My name is Jeff Burbrink. I am the co-chair for the Field Cross Focus Group, and this is our July 15th, 2025 crop and weather biweekly update. We will get started with a weather report from Beth Hall. Beth, what are you going to tell us today?
I hope it's good news. Always tough this time of year, right? Go off to the side and we'll jump in with temperatures. And I know if you're looking at these maps like I usually do, I'm thinking, yeah, it's orange. And of course, because it's summer. And so why wouldn't it be orange? But then I need to remind myself this isn't necessarily how warm it's been, but really how much warmer than normal it has been. So we often get tripped up with that during our warm season because we look at this and think, I don't know if it's anything big to worry about because, of course, it's summer. But if we start looking at the actual values with the color bar down at the bottom, we're seeing that over the last 30 days, the temperatures have really been 3 to 5, maybe 3 to 6 degrees above normal. So if that normal, we use the 30-year period of 1991 to 2020, that starts to add up. We start to feel it. Now, the last 30 days did include our first big heat wave of the season. So I have a feeling that that is what has pushed this greater than normal over that time period. The three maps are distinguished. For the one on the far left is the average daily temperature, and then we average those 30-day averages together. The one in the middle, though, that has a bit stronger colors, that is the minimum temperature. And then on the far right is the maximum. So I want to call that out a little bit because even though they all look orange, if we try and figure out which one looks redder than the others, it is that minimum temperature. And that's telling us that those nighttime cool temperatures are just not cooling off that much. And that had a lot to do with the higher humidity that was in the air. That's essentially water vapor, and that water vapor can retain the heat. So we might be experiencing that if we don't use air conditioning, we like sleep with the windows open. But livestock and even plants tend to like to recover overnight. If things have been really heat stressed during the day, we look forward to the relief at night. And this is showing that there was quite an extended period where there wasn't that much relief. Whereas the daytime highs, I would say that was the palest of the three maps shown to say that, yeah, we had warm temperatures, but they were only a couple of degrees warmer than normal. So it may not have felt that warm because that would have been more of our awake hours where we could have reflected thinking, sure, we get heat waves all the time. It's no big deal. But trying to pay more attention to it's the nighttime lows that are not offering the relief. For growing degree days, the total accumulations that start April 1st is on the left, and then on the right is how that compares to climatology. And I know the last couple of times I've done this presentation, I was thinking, yeah, we see colors, and certainly there's a lot more tan and orange and red colors in that departure map. But when we're talking total accumulations of 1600, say, across the state, then what is a difference of 80 or 120? That got me thinking, and I was talking to our partners at the USDA Midwest Climate Hub. We're exploring looking at providing products that instead of showing the departure from average in like terms of units, maybe talking about it in terms of how many days ahead or behind normal is it for Indiana? So I looked up some historical tables, and this time of year, around mid-July, generally across Indiana, we are accumulating about 20 units per day. So now when we look at the departure numbers on this map that are saying that departures are around 60, 80, 100 units warmer than normal, what that's saying is we are 3, 4, 5 days ahead of normal, which may not seem like a lot, but we're suddenly approaching a week ahead of normal when thinking about it that way. Drought, the latest drought map that was released last Thursday based on data through last Tuesday. So any rain systems that came through since a week ago would not be reflected in this map. But essentially, you see areas where there are abnormally dry conditions, that's the yellow. And according to the US Drought Monitor, this is really, that category is used as kind of a transition category, saying we're not quite in drought yet, but we're seeing indicators that are suggesting we're heading in that direction. At the same time, the D0 or the yellow areas could be the opposite, saying we're not necessarily out of drought, but things are improving. So it's not necessarily a huge alarm to see that. It's more cautionary of conditions are changing in that area. We did introduce 2 new zones with this map, the one that is along the Ohio-Indiana border around Adams County, and the blob, I like to call it, down in southern Indiana. And those were just because of consistent lack of rainfall. We were seeing indications on the ground, reports from Extension. County Extension was telling us that things were providing indication that we could be heading into a drought situation. I'll show you in a couple slides, though, what our recommendations are to the national authors this week. We do have 2 areas in the northwestern part of Indiana that are in official drought. It's called moderate drought. And it's just because really the northern part of our state has not been getting as much precipitation as the rest of the state. Thinking though about precipitation, the map on the left is giving accumulated precipitation over the last 30 days, and amounts here seem to be ranging from around 2 inches to over 5 inches. Now, I always look at that and I'm like, hey, looks green, looks wet, looks blue. That's good. But that's why we like to put this into climatological or historical perspective to see, well, is that normal? And we can see that for a large part of the state, those amounts, while they might have sounded good, are still less than what we have historically seen in comparison to the 1991 to 2022 amounts for that 30-day period. Definitely spotty, though. You see areas where it was above normal, and that's because this time of year we get more what's called convective precipitation, which are these pop-up thunderstorms, so they kind of pop up and decrease as opposed to massive systems that move through and take up the entire state. Soil moisture has been gradually declining actually over the last couple of weeks. But you'll see in southern Indiana, even though we had reported the abnormally dry conditions, and even over in the Adams County area, our weather station at NEPAC and DPAC are still in the 20s, which is a decline. But usually it's that 35% that says, yeah, things are pretty wet, pretty soaked. So southern Indiana is still looking good. Northern Indiana, though, has been drying out gradually. And so we're keeping an eye on that. For most of the locations, we say we're at wilting point when the percentage hits 15%. So we're not quite there at the 4-inch and 8-inch level. But I wouldn't be surprised if we don't see rain for the next, say, 1 to 2 weeks, that we will hit wilting point and things will get more serious. However, when I show you the forecast, I think that we should be safe. Another shout out with this call of all of the counties that have been submitting the reports around the state to help give the state drought task team an idea of what are you seeing on the ground. You'll see also that I call out, and this slide is not one that I planned for today's presentation. This is the one I give yesterday or on Monday morning. So you can get an idea of some of the reports that you guys turned in and the types of impacts. I'll call that out and on that call on Monday morning. And so really want to thank you. But overall, we're getting reports of drying lawns going dormant, browning. We're seeing reports of crops being stunted, pineapple corn, curling of the corn, which is important. And then there were a couple folks that were saying irrigation is running pretty much consistently across northern Indiana. Tile lines are running dry. So those are really helpful inputs to provide for us because it really does help sell the story, if you will. A lot of times, if you guys want the national authors of the U.S. Drought Monitor to say something different, it's not coming up on the map. And this does tie to insurance reports, if you will, or claims, then I need to report to the national author why we think that it needs to be different than what they're saying. So really what you say does matter, and we send it forth. I did want to point out, because we are approaching the time of year, though, where drying lawns, dormant lawns, and this is where this whole job, if you will, is not easy. It's very complicated. Do the lawns that you're seeing that are browning, is that normal? Is that normal for this time of year? I mean, it seems like and this is something I don't know. To me, it's like, well, it seems like every summer the lawns start to brown and dry out. So we need to ask ourselves, at what point do we go from a normal, it's a lot of heat, a lot of ET, this time of year, so we kind of expect the grasses to dry out, versus no, this is pretty abnormal for this time of year, or the rate of browning is a lot more abnormal, if you will, than normal. I don't have an answer, so I'm not saying, hey, when you say the lawns are browning, that's not a good impact. It's just got me thinking of, but where do we draw the line between what is normal for this time of year regarding lawns and crops and so forth versus abnormal? This is what I will be submitting later this afternoon to the U.S. Drought Monitor. Essentially, we're going to call or recommend that all of northern Indiana be at least abnormally dry. So before it was really more focused in the northwestern part of the state, but we're just seeing from your reports and quantitative information related to precipitation, soil moisture, etc., that the northern Indiana just still is not recovering as well. And you'll see I also dip it along the western border, west central border of Indiana, because we are seeing similar problems along Vermilion County, northern Vigo County, Park County, etc. We're going to remove that D0 area down in the south, because really in the last couple of weeks there's been a lot of rain, and the reports are that soil moistures have recovered nicely. So just wanted to give you all heads up. It is possible that the national author will come back and disagree with what we're recommending. Now, for the last part, I just want to review what our forecast looks like from the National Weather Service and NOAA. This is the 7-day total precipitation being forecasted. So from essentially today through about next Tuesday, and you can see a lot of strong colors over Indiana, especially again, southern Indiana. My goodness, they get a lot of rain down there. So looking at the legend, probably up to 4 inches of rain is expected over the next 7 days. But northern Indiana isn't necessarily going to lose out. Even northern Indiana is at this point expected to get around over an inch of rain. Now, in terms of timing, I would say the first half of the next 7 days, so the next couple of days through the end of this week, it's going to be benefiting southern Indiana, and then probably starting near the end of this weekend is when northern Indiana will get their share of the precipitation. As far as climate outlooks go, the top maps are showing for the 6 to 10 day period, which is July 20th. I believe that's around Sunday into next week. And then the bottom one is the 8 to 14 day temperature and precipitation outlook that pretty much takes us to the end of the month. Combining both of those, the message is we are probably going to be looking at another heat wave coming through. The confidence, though, the shading of this is really more about how confident we are that temperatures are going to be above normal, not necessarily the magnitude. But you can see that Indiana, for both the 6 to 10 and the 8 to 14 day period, those are some pretty strong reddish colors. So we're pretty confident temperatures are going to be warmer than normal. Regarding precipitation for the next 2 weeks, essentially, there is slight confidence that the precipitation will be above normal. It's not as strong, certainly in the first part. So next week, we are a little bit more confident, like I said in the previous image of the 7-day forecast, of precipitation, that northern Indiana is probably going to get more. But even through the end of the month, it's going to continue to have a chance of being above normal. What this tells me is, yeah, there's going to be winners and losers. We're just at the time of year when the precipitation is very spotty, where one field is going to get it and another field is not. But the good news is, because we have this almost continuous every couple of days, we're expecting a chance of rain. This is really going to be pushing away the opportunity for us to be using phrases such as flash drought or rapid intensification of drought. Yes, conditions are still dry, particularly in the northern part of our state, but in my opinion, the good news is things are not deteriorating quickly. If anything, the precipitation we're expecting should kind of hold things steady. So I just wanted to caution you guys, I'm not anticipating any serious drought, but there could be dry areas that evolve. And then the monthly and seasonal outlooks, again, with temperature for both of these. So the monthly is really for the rest of this month of June, and it is about 2 weeks old now. And the seasonal outlook, that's about a month old, because the seasonal outlooks are released on the third Thursday of every month. But regardless, both of them are predicting temperatures are going to continue to be above normal over this time period, and precipitation, there's really very little guidance in terms of this longer time period out of what it's going to look like. And I think that's all I have. If anybody has any questions?
You know, those pop-up storms can really be amazing. We had one pop up last Wednesday over our fairgrounds, and it dumped about an inch of rain in just a few minutes' time, and then it just poof went away. So amazing.
Yeah,
Little
and yesterday
small.
we had members from the National Weather Service on the drought task force call, and that's kind of what they were saying, is these things are going to be so spotty, but you really could get a full inch, which is an extraordinary amount of water if you think about it, in that short time. So when it dumps, it's going to dump. You're going to see localized flooding. There's going to be issues all related to that, whereas you could just drive a couple of blocks away, maybe within a mile away, and see that they're still struggling. They could have used any of that rain.
Okay, thanks once again, Beth. Appreciate your help.
You're welcome.
Let's move on to agronomy department, and we'll start out with Dan Quinn.
Hey, thanks, Jeff. Big thing from the corn side, and Beth kind of touched on this, is just all over the place. I'll probably reiterate that note. You can just put that on recording for the rest of the year. Stuff is just all over the place in terms of condition and also just where it's at for the crop. We have corn that, is well into tasseling and pollination, approaching R2, and then we have corn that's still, V3, V4, depending on when it was planted. A lot of areas in the state, we touched on this, east, southeast, southern parts of the state that had to plant in June and even into mid-June in those areas. So, and then there were some replants that went on in some of those areas. Just been a struggle in some of those spots. But really, in terms of calls and issues, it's just been highly variable. Depends on where you're at and what's going on in the state. When you look at Indiana, crop condition ratings continue to decrease. I think we're about 59% good to excellent as of yesterday. That's down a couple percentage points from last week. It doesn't really surprise me that it's been decreasing. It's just the crop is just highly variable all around the state, and then you factor in Northwest Indiana, I think has really been the most stressed when it comes to the dry conditions. That reflects the drought monitor that Beth showed. Also in that area of the state, you get a lot of lighter, sandier soils too, so that kind of confounds those impacts. Indiana, I think we're sitting about 39% silking, which is actually above the 5-year average for silking. May not seem like it based on where you're at. So we're actually a little bit ahead in terms of overall statewide crop progression. I think a lot of that has to do with just the amount of growing degree days and thermal heat units we've had. We've had some interesting aspects show up in the crop in terms of rapid growth and things going on with it, just really just hoofing through some of these growth stages across the state. But again, all over the place. Big things to monitor are going to be just the differences in rainfall, especially with a lot of the state, approaching 50% silking. We get in that R1 stage. I reiterate just how sensitive and important that growth stage for the crop is. ET rates are the highest, water use rates are the highest. Corn is just really sensitive at that stage. So any level of stress, it could be storm damage, hail, nutrient deficiencies, drought stress. The highest yield losses per day are exhibited at R1, that silking stage. So really critical growth stage. I'm sure I'll let Darcy talk on the disease side, but that's going to be a big one to really start monitoring. I know there's some diseases that are starting to pop up around the state. Big thing with as we get into, if we have these drought conditions, keep in mind that a lot of areas in the state were planted wet or were planted behind, and then also had wet conditions even through emergence as that crop going kind of got up and moving. I expect a lot of just kind of shallow or compromised root systems out there. Root depth in corn is largely impacted by the water table. So it can be 3 feet deep, it could be 6, 7, 8 feet deep. It's just going to be a function of where that water table is with that development. And so that could impact, I think, in a lot of areas of the state where we have, shallow or more compromised root systems, whether it be from compaction of late wet planting, but also just saturated conditions as that crop went on. Problem with that is it could confound some of these drought conditions as they start to creep in. We might start seeing some of those crops actually start showing stresses in terms of drought stress, leaf rolling, pineapple corn. We talk about maybe showing that a little bit earlier just because of those root systems. Had a few calls on nitrogen in corn, especially corn that's late vegetative, approaching tasseling. A lot of areas that lost nitrogen out there. Some areas in the state. I talked to a farmer recently that had 10 inches of rain after his side dress application. He had nitrogen deficiency showing up in his corn, even just before tassel or is approaching tassel. Corn can still respond to nitrogen, and if you are seeing those deficiencies show up at tassel or a little bit before, I really would strongly consider if they have the ability to put additional nitrogen on at that time, because in many cases with those delayed end applications, that's where we see the biggest benefit from them. Corn will still take up nitrogen. It'll still use nitrogen even as we get up to pollination and silking. What's also critical when we start seeing those deficiency symptoms show up, especially when it's been pretty wet in some of those areas at, say, R1 growth stage. That's when corn its root system is max. That's when its depth of its root system is max. So I've gotten asked, well, do you think that corn will still be able to get down to some of those nitrogen? And that's not always the case, right? That root system is max. It's starting to transition where it's putting all of its energy and time. It's going into the ear. But corn will still use and take up nitrogen, especially if you're seeing it at late vegetative stages and also into the early pollination stages. As you get into R2, R3, and then basically the nitrogen demand of the plant goes down. It just goes on down at a steady pace as we progress in those reproductive stages. But seeing it show up that early and at such a critical growth stage as R1, it sometimes is worthwhile. You think about wide drop applications or late season spray applications. Dribbling it on the soil surface is what we want. That can be a beneficial practice, or fertigation if you have that opportunity as well. But just keep in mind that just things popping up in terms of end loss in some areas, dry conditions in other areas, in terms of leaf rolling, compromised root systems in others, other areas that look very good too. There's some corn out there that looks great. There's corn that's still in early vegetative stages, so it's just all over the place as well. And then I'll just reiterate too, with the drought conditions, especially in some of those areas, we typically look at rolling in corn leaves. Is it occurring in the morning? That's the most concerning. Corn will roll leaves in the heat of the afternoon. That's normal. That doesn't really give us any indication of stress if it's doing it a day or here or there. It's in the afternoon. That's normal. But if it's occurring in the morning, if it's being consistent throughout the day, and then what we've typically looked at in terms of yield losses, it's usually about 3 to 4 days of consistent leaf rolling and then continuing to persist. So you get into R1, R2 growth stages, you can see 5, 6, 7% yield loss per day if those leaf rolling has consisted or been consistent for 4 consecutive days and then continues. So be mindful of that. How long has it been rolling? When is it rolling during the day? Is it starting in the morning? And then really severe cases, corn will actually start to turn color. It'll really kind of start to shut down its photosynthesis. It'll start to turn a little bit gray. That's when we get really concerned. So hopefully we don't get that far in some areas, but just be mindful of watching the crop, watching the condition in some of those areas. And leaf rolling is a telltale sign, especially when it's occurring, multiple days and in the morning, that hey, maybe we might be losing some yield as we get to some of these sensitive growth stages. But overall, those are kind of the main updates I had. It's just all over the place. Calls I've had have been very diverse. It just depends on where you're at and what you're dealing with in terms of areas that had too much rain, too little rain, different stresses. It's just been highly variable, largely depending on where you're at in the state. But condition ratings kind of keep creeping down. I think that reflects just some of the challenges and variability that we have around the state. So that's all I have. Kind of threw a lot of things at you, but if you have any questions, let me know.
Deal, soybean update, maybe even a little bit of a weed update. What's happening?
All right. Can you hear me? I'm on the traveling side.
Yes.
Okay. So in terms of the soybean front, we've got variability. That's going to be the message of the day. I think it's the buzzword bingo every time you hear a variable or this range, right? The extremes. And so we have the same thing across the soybean front. We've got beans that are coming into R3. And so a lot of people think about doing fungicide applications, insecticide applications at that growth stage, whether they need it or not. To those that are, just planted last week, and maybe even some that still caught another rain that didn't allow them to plant timely. And so, or even timely late, or even double crop timely. So we've got this strong range of growth stages and conditions across the state. When I think about what's going on within those, a lot of let's talk about the crop that was ahead or just kind of the front runners, if you will. And so those are the ones that are coming in R2, R3, so full bloom, the first pod. A lot of those were just kind of slow growing in the month of May and June, and they're short. The node counts are maybe a little bit behind, so that's where the trifolates attach. Kind of wonder about some of that early growth and then how that translates to the end of the year. So one of the things that people need to consider is maybe the crop isn't as tall as it could be or should be, but we still need to be mindful of the growth stage itself. Growth stages are critical for a lot of our applications. So whether you think about the herbicide front, right, able to apply through flowering or first flowering, you have to look at that label pretty closely, not just, okay, are these beans knee high or chest high or, waist high? And so when we look at those, are they flowering at the top? That's full bloom. And are those on label or off label? You think about conditions for the disease front. Darcy, I'm sure, will talk about that. And then go over to the other side where we have fields that were just planted or in those early vegetative stages, and make sure that we are able to get out there and take care of the weeds that we need to. What I would say is when we're scouting, let's go with those that are R2 at this moment, full bloom and coming into first pod, looking for disease, looking for any outbreaks or misses on the weed front. It's a good opportunity to take leaf samples for nutrition. And so when we do that, we go out there, we take, usually it's the third to fourth trifoliate from the top. And so when you find the growing point, those trifoliates that are rolled up tight like a burrito or almost a hard shell taco and count down, the third to fourth one down. These are really good places to take multiple samples across the field to see where you're at nutritionally, and then if there's any corrective action that could be happening in the following 7 days, 10 days, something like that, if you're going to go out there with any foliar protection, insects, or disease, or none at all there, but we do have some need to correct. Manganese is a classic one that we'll see that will have some corrective action. I will say if people are going through taking leaf samples and they are in those fields that are or more drought stressed, all right, so corn rolls up like a pineapple. Soybeans, they show their silver green underneath side, so they're going to flip, all right, so they're not going to show their dark green tops of their leaves. They're going to flip their leaves over and have that silver green so it reflects more sunlight. So that's one indicator of a stressed soybean field. The next level is then on the trifoliate, you got the side leaflets that are going to kind of start to clamp in, and then just think about matching up like two hands coming together. And so that's even more severe droughty kind of conditions. So that's one for just the knowledge whenever you're looking at stress fields or not. As you advance in growth and development, you're going to have more water use, water need, just like you do in corn. If it's the younger plants, the thing that's going on with the younger plants, they don't need as much water, but their root systems could be compromised, or they're not as not explored the ground. So yes, they don't need as much, but the water in the upper 6, 8 inches is not as plentiful as it is down 8, 12, 13, 16 inches. And so those could actually be stressed out, even though they don't need as much on a plant basis. They just don't have the root system where they need to be. So have that all in mind. And then the final point on that is when you take those samples for nutrition, and if you happen to be taking them in a field that's drought stress, we're going to see some odd numbers on the nutrients. Potassium in particular can really be an odd one. If someone's taking a sample in the morning where the leaves have good turgid to them versus in the afternoon whenever they're kind of wilting up a little bit or flipping their leaves, those potassium numbers are going to be low. So just be mindful of that. And then as we continue to go through this disease front, any other insects or whatnot is coming to our mind. Wheat, you made the comment, wheat's been coming off fairly clean. I haven't heard any major reports of infection dawn or any of that. Yield levels have been fair. I think we come back to the timeliness of a double crop planting of soybeans. So the southern half of the state, if we've already got the wheat out, most guys are rolling right afterwards. If we're in the northern half and trying to do anything now, the 15th of July, it's hard pressed to make a double crop pay. What I always like to do on double crop in the north is find when your typical fall freeze is and back calculate 90 days. So if it's October 15th, 16th is your typical fall freeze. Go back 90 days. That puts us right July 15th, 16th. And that's when the soybeans need to be up and out of the ground, emerge, not planted, but up and out of the ground to have a chance of maturing in time. So I think those are just some good rules of thumb to have in our back pocket as we look at double cropping. With that, I guess I'll just pause, see if there's any questions on the soybean front.
I was hearing 100 bushel yields for the wheat, and the straw yields were excellent, and no issues at all with any kind of disease or anything. So everybody seemed to be very happy with their wheat this last week. Any questions for Shaun? We'll go to Lyndon Kelley since we've got some drought areas in the state. Lyndon is our irrigation person. What can you tell us, Lyndon, for advice on irrigation?
For those people that have invested in irrigation, it's important to use it. When we start talking about drought stress and rolling corn and flipping beans, these are excellent indicators, but for irrigators, they're indicators that you're too late. Basically, most of even our best systems put about an inch of water on in 3 days. So if you're already rolling, you're going to have 2 or 3 days on at least part of the field that are going to roll again. So that's we're trying to push more and more to a scientific-based irrigation scheduling. I sent Jeff 6 PowerPoint slides for those of you that are interested in irrigation. I'd encourage you to pull them up One of them gives you some tools, a one-page fact sheet on tools available for Michigan and Indiana farmers to do irrigation scheduling. Also on that set of links is an article that we've done previous years and we've recently updated, talking about be careful when you're considering summer purchase of irrigation equipment. Now, it sounds terrible when your irrigation person tells you be very leery of buying any irrigation equipment in the middle of the summer. But the truth is, most of the mistakes we've seen in irrigation purchases were done in this kind of situation in the middle of July. So just be very leery of trying to encourage producers to make huge purchases of irrigation equipment this time of year. This week, if we look at the reference ET, we're going to use about 1.5 inches of water. A lot of our dryland corners and things are already burning up. Unless you were lucky, extremely spotty. We have plot work where we've had 4.5 inches in the last 4 weeks, and we have other plot work where we have only 1.25 inches in the last 4 weeks. So it's really hard to make general statements as we work through that. And then last but not least, if the Michiana Irrigation Association sent out their summer newsletter about Thursday, you're going to get an electronic copy of that, encouraging you to use those articles. Just make sure to credit them as the Michiana Irrigation Association's summer newsletter and then the author in the name. So that has an article in it about sort of last chance nitrogen through fertigation. So make use of those articles, and it helps boost the Michiana Irrigation Association's membership. Any questions, please now or give me a call or an email.
Thank you, Lyndon. For those of you in other parts of the state, Michiana is kind of a blend of Michigan and Indiana. Up here in this part of the world, they call it Michiana. So no further questions for Lyndon. We'll move on to Tommy Butts and talk a little bit about weed control.
Hopefully most people are starting to calm down a little bit on weed control. As you can tell, we're not. We're still out spraying. You know, we never stop, apparently. But at least in corn, I think for the most part, we should be tailing off and shouldn't have to worry about trying to make too many applications yet. I will say scouting is still going to be pretty important. I know I've had last week or a couple weeks ago, I guess, when I talked about the burr cucumber in this meeting, I had several people reach out to me on that. If you see more burr cucumber, you have more fields, please feel free to continue to reach out to me on that. We're in the process of trying to set up a couple of those studies using a drone and figuring out best ways to go after that late season in corn. So yeah, feel free to let me know on that. But just keep an eye out for some of those weeds. We were just doing some weed counts in soybeans as well, and it's the same thing there. Just in the past week, we've had a massive flush of morning glory start coming up, and water hemp is still coming. So a lot of those late season ones are coming on strong right now. So scouting's still important. If nothing else, just to know that you might need a pre-harvest application. Because both Shaun and Dan kind of mentioned we're getting towards cutoffs. You know, a lot of our beans are hitting that R1, R2, R3 even. And we just don't have a lot of options to attack anything safely anymore. But if we can be aware, we can try and target some of that in a pre-harvest interval, maybe knock back seed production, or at least get the combine through easier. That will help out a lot. Speaking of safety, particularly with beans, I know we all push the limits on Liberty applications. You know, it's supposed to be up on 2 R1 that we apply that. I know I've heard of a lot of R2 applications going out, R3, R4 even, trying to get some of that those late season weed escapes. Just be aware there's a pretty good amount of data, and we're doing some more this year actually in a multi-university study, but there's pretty good amount of data that kind of talks about knocking blooms off of soybeans when you do some of these late season applications of Liberty. So we're trying to this year get a better idea of just how much yield loss that might actually equate to at the different timings, but just be aware if you're knocking off blooms, it's never a good thing, right? So try and limit those as much as possible. And I guess the last thing along those lines that I was going to say is I mean, I might as well just echo what everybody else has said with variability, right? So across the entire state, we have a whole gamut of growth stages and crop stages, even within fields where we had some flooding and things. And we may have 10 different growth stages in the same field. When it comes to weed control, that makes it really difficult because we're essentially not going to canopy in different places. And if we don't canopy in those areas, it leaves it open for more weeds to come up and just give us problems and either cause yield loss or just return seed to the seed bank that we're going to deal with next year. So just be aware on a lot of that, continue to scout, try and manage it, as closely as you can. It's going to be just a challenging year on that front. We're probably going to have some seed get back in the seed bank and we'll have to deal with it next year, but it's the best we can do for this year. Oh, and I guess the last thing I wanted to mention. So Shaun mentioned some double crop soybean things. I know there's some of that going in the ground. We got a couple studies going in the ground on that front too. Just again, like everything else, watch your weeds as well. We typically don't have as bad of weed problems in double crop soybeans simply because we have all the residue left from the wheat, right? That's acting like a cover crop and helping suppress weed emergence and things. But our data continues to say, if you can put down a strong residual, that helps out a lot, even in double crop soybean, and it might save you a post-emergence application, basically. So I'd almost rather guys be throwing down a residual than trying to just wait and hit it all with a post, just because we typically get better weed control, and plus it's better for herbicide resistance management at that point as well. So just wanted to throw that in there too on the double crop soybean front. With that, I think that's about all I have, unless anybody has any questions for me.
Thanks, Tommy. Yeah, I was seeing some quite a bit of ragweed popping up in some of that wheat stubble this last week. So yeah, it's coming up. Anybody have some questions for Tommy? We'll move on to Darcy and catch up on the disease front.
Well, good morning, everyone. I guess my front is a little more active today. I know we talked a little bit about wheat, but I do want to know if anybody knows of any updates of loads being rejected. I've heard there were a few in the southern part of the state. So if you know of any, please can send me a note. I'm just wondering what the levels of DON were that were leading to rejection, if that was happening. We just finished harvesting most of our plots across the state, so relatively clean for us on the wheat side. But just a note, if you hear any of those, let me know so we can track that. Let's see, we'll move into corn. And so I'm going to share some tools and just talk through what we're seeing. So if I look at the corn, why is this not? All right. So hopefully you can see my website, right? You can see the website maps for tar spot. Is that what you see, Jeff?
Yes, we can.
Yes, okay. So you can see I continue to add more counties. Actually just added Knox County this morning, and let's see who else I just added. Knox, Fulton, and Johnson County, where we're getting images or samples into the clinic to confirm for tar spot. So yes, we're starting to see more tar spot. Where I worry about it is where we have the corn that's moving ahead and, approaching R2, R1 silking, center part of the state, I guess. I was out in Randolph County on Friday, late last Friday, and a beautiful corn way above my head with ears at my head level. And we were finding tar spot there. That is the corn that I am willing to pull the trigger on. So from our data, generally the timing for one single application is anywhere from tassel to R3. I was pushing this year because of the drier conditions that have moved in, that I would wait to full silk. So I think some of those fields are going to go because they found active disease and we're finding that secondary infection at the knee level. So in those areas, I would say the risk is getting higher, and I continue to get some images in where there's a little bit more tar spot than just one little lesion on a leaf in that lower canopy. So again, I guess my comment to growers is be out looking for it, especially if the corn is approaching silking, and then make that informed decision. You can also see here before I move from this site, I do have a probable southern corn rust in Knox County too. It came in with that tar spot sample. It looks highly likely. That sample's on the way to John. So we'll turn it positive once we get that sample and identify it. So that's just something to keep an eye on. If I look into this map, you can actually see, Kentucky turned on last Friday, but you can see where there's a lot of southern rust there in the south. And so those weather systems may have moved, they're moving those spores north. So be keeping an eye out on that. That sample, I can't just diagnose from a picture. We do need to have the leaf sent into John so we can confirm the spores, because there can be some confusion with common rust. But the image I got today definitely looks more like southern rust than common rust. Other diseases out there. So where the corn is looking pretty good, we do have gray leaf spot in the lower canopy. My students found northern corn leaf blight, and then I am seeing some physoderma pop up, and that would really be related to the hybrid susceptibility of where that disease is. That infection occurred back to the rural stage, and we probably had good conditions for that to occur too. So those are some of the diseases we're seeing. In regards to tar spot, there are other tools that are coming active that you can share with your growers. When I get done talking, I'll share in the chat my article from Pest and Crop last week that has a lot of these links if you're looking for it. But the crop risk tool, if growers are looking for, and I just want to remind you, and I forget whether I've told you this or not, but the Tar Spotter app, the Sporecaster app for white mold, they've all been shut down because Wisconsin had lost funding to keep those apps going and to continue to update them. We've moved all those models to the Crop Protection Network, which is good news because actually it turns into a one-stop shop. So you can kind of see, let me zoom back out here if I can. I've logged in. So my website remembers the sites that I choose. So let's see if I can go back. So it has all my sites, all the farms we're on and for the state in Indiana. I'll turn it back to that. So you can kind of see every time I log in on this website on my computer, it brings up all the locations that we're trying to monitor for sites. The neat little thing is, I got to move this out of the way. So I got soybean up. We'll go to corn since we're on corn right now. But it'll give you the models for that. And it's going to take a second here to update, I think. Let's see if it'll switch back. Now it's frozen on me. Hold on. We'll refresh it here for a second. But so this actually has both corn and soybean models. So it has the tar spot model. We also have a gray leaf spot model. And once these update, you'll kind of see where the risk is. And you can kind of see with this dry weather, the tar spot model has dropped off. That being said, there may be some locations where we're moving back into more positive conditions for the disease. And then once it's updated, we also have the white mold model. So as this is thinking, maybe I'll come back here in a second. Also on the Crop Protection Network, there are a lot new resources and tools available. The one here I'm showing is called Crop Lookout, and it's pulling all the map data, all the tracking data for tar spot, wheat, southern rust, or any other issues that come in. So this is a kind of a neat little tool. So if you look at the different counties, you can click on it and it'll show you what was found. You can actually dig in a little bit, and if I put any comments in that tar spot positive information, it may say something about it. This one just says it's confirmed. But again, just a new tool that's available. Also, it gives an option of letting people submit reports that way. These reports do come directly to me and John, so you can send a picture, say you're seeing something in the field, just another way to submit samples versus the PPDL. I will say that if the picture's not good or we can't diagnose from that image, we will go back and probably request that a sample be sent into the clinic. So that's one other tool. Let's see if the crop risk tool is updated yet. As it's thinking, because I have so many sites, it does take a little bit because it's pulling all the weather conditions from the last month. We'll let it sit here for a second. In addition to this tool, so the map is showing us where we have active tar spots. So I know we're over 15 counties. We have this crop risk tool. It's going to look at the weather conditions. Are they conducive for the disease? From there, if growers are asking questions on what kind of fungicides you want or available, I'll go back here to the Crop Protection Network. There is a fungicide efficacy tool, and you can kind of go in and search your crop. So if I'm looking for corn foliar and I want to target tar spot, I can make those selections and then search for those products. And let's see if it'll have everything's yes. So then it gives you the list of the products that have a rating. You can actually go over this again and sort them by, you can have them sort by best ratings versus worst, and it should reorganize them. Of course, everything's not working today. So yeah, so it did reorganize them from very good down. So you can kind of look at the different products. I would say if guys are looking for if they're looking at generics, I would cross-reference the ingredients, and then you can kind of make an informed decision whether any of those products may control the disease. But you can go in here for all the different diseases. There's both corn, wheat, all the different tables that we have are available, and it kind of helps you search those tables for the different products. So again, another tool that growers could use. There's also the corn fungicide calculator, and I think I mentioned this before and talked about it in the winter, where you can go in and select what kind of severity level you expect in your field. You can put in your yield. So we want, let's say 220 yields, and then the commodity price, so you can drop it down to 4. And then, if you know your price of your fungicide, you can enter that, and then it's going to run based on our university data, the treatment cost per acre, the expected net benefit per acre, and then the probability of breaking even. So again, that's kind of where that information is available. So at $4 corn, if we expect 220 yields, if I look at Mirabis Neo here, for example, it's at the top, we may get a $9 benefit per acre 52% of the time. So that's just a kind of neat little tool to look at what your products are. If you know you get a different price point, then you can make that adjustment and look at the probability of breaking even there. So there's a crop ROI tool for looking at single applications across the board. And what just came live last week is we also now, and I'll switch to beans real quickly here, there's a white mold ROI tool. So based on white mold research trials where we've had white mold, you can go in here and look at your soybean yield. So say you want, 60 bushels per acre, disease severity. So you can change your disease, whether it's 30, which is a high level, or if you want, if it's down lower at 20% disease severity, cost per acre, and then it's going to give you a net benefit of that as well for those products that are labeled for white mold. So again, just another tool that growers could go in and look at. It also give you the chance of breaking even when we have those levels. So again, some new tools that are available to kind of make an informed decision if we want to trigger a fungicide spray. Speaking of white mold, if I get back to this model, if it finally loads. So here I'll go backwards now. We'll talk about corn real quick. So you can kind of see, if I look at acres, tar spot, it's dropped way off with those dry conditions. We're below 1% low risk for today. Gray leaf spot is high risk, and it's not surprising that I can find gray leaf spot in the lower canopy there at acre, but we haven't found tar spot yet. Penny's really low, so you can kind of see that as well. But again, these tools are available. So there's the tar spot and gray leaf spot, depending on your location. I was gonna say the soybean is the one that's showing stuff. So if I look at soybeans, so it has both white mold and frog eye leaf spot, which is also a new model. On dry soybeans, really don't see a white mold risk if we're at flowering. So again, between R1 and R3. But if I change it and we talk about under irrigated sites, and then I say I have 30-inch row spacing, let's see if it'll update for me. Maybe 15-inch, maybe it dropped off. But the other day it ramped up for me. Yep, here it goes. So if I changed it to irrigated, tighter spacing, we've now changed the conditions within that canopy. You can see the white mold risk went high. And so if I had growers that have beans that are flowering under irrigation and have 15-inch rows, they have high risk for white mold developing at those sites. So if I was at acre with that situation, then I would think about, yes, maybe it's time to pull the trigger and put a fungicide spray out. And then you can go back to that ROI tool and identify which fungicide you want to use for white mold. I do want to mention, white mold has a different set of fungicides than what we're targeting for foliar diseases like frog eye leaf spot. But you can see here in frog eye at acre, we jumped up to 40% risk. We're triggering a spray today on our R3 beans at acre with that risk, because we're trying to validate these tools as well. So we'll be spraying at 40%, 50%, 60%. To try to determine, will these tools help predict the risk for each field? But again, some new tools that are available to kind of monitor what's going on, and then the weather conditions based on our data for the different diseases develop in the crop canopy. Okay, I know I went real fast on some of those, but again, lots of different tools you can utilize. I will gonna backtrack though. The other thing, in addition to tracking tar spot, is I was in fields yesterday. I'm going to go back to a picture here. I have, if I can find it, of red crown rat, because I know I have it here on the website. Let me see if I can open this one. See if I can get it to stop. So there's red crown rat. And you can kind of see this is classic symptomology. We're not here yet, but I was in fields on Friday where the area where we know we had a history of red crown rot, the beans were just looking a little slightly shorter than the other areas of the field. We went in, so the beans were at full flower, R2. And in those areas, we pulled up the roots and they weren't as bright red as that, but the root systems were already gone. So in another couple weeks, I'll turn like this, but I want to know that we need to really be tracking what's going on in the fields. The foliar symptomology for red crown rot is going to mimic sudden death syndrome, charcoal rot, Phytophthora, brown stem rot. They all have similar foliar symptoms with that flecking that can occur on those leaves. So it's important in those areas of the fields where you may be driving by and saying, oh, there's that SDS patch that's starting to turn again this season, to get out and really look at it, because it could be something else. And we really need to know how widespread this red crown rot issue is. It may not yet change our management situation, but again, we need to know what is the main pathogen causing these areas that are turning in the fields and this year. So we'll be pushing that. I'm going to be writing an article tomorrow for Pest and Crop to remind everybody that we're trying to push for samples to come in to look at this new pathogen and try to determine how widespread it's distributed here in Indiana. And I can show you a map of where I know it is. I'll go over here. So the red crown rot map, we have that tracking again with the same group that's tracking all the other diseases. So if you look at Indiana, we have, those four areas where we have disease. I suspect it's wider spread. So I was down in here, this Decatur County is where I was Friday, where we were pulling some samples to look at. But again, it's a reminder, the guys need to get out and look and check those spots again. And I'll keep putting that reminder up as we move towards August. Then we start seeing more of those foliar symptoms that will help us to identify those patches. But again, just a number of diseases to keep an eye on, keep out scouting, and then use these tools to make the informed decision if we really want to pull that fungicide application, especially with the commodity prices being lower. I know we need to be judicious on our use of these products to try to minimize costs per acre. So I think that's it. I think I covered everything that I have on my list here.
Thank you, Darcy. A lot of information. Next up, Christian Krupke with an insect update.
Okay, thank you. Good morning, everybody. This won't take long. This period of time is sort of the reverse of Darcy's area of expertise. This is kind of our quiet time for insects. Most of the crops have gotten to the point where it's difficult for insects to have much effect on them. In the past, we'd worry about things like soybean aphid and soybeans and some insects that chew silks and reduce pollination in corn. Those days are not these days. Things are different now, and we're not seeing those pressures. However, the main reason I wanted to jump on today is to make everyone aware of the status of a pest, an invasive pest, a native of Central America, Mexico, that's a corn pest called the corn leafhopper. You'd think we would have heard about the corn leafhopper by now, but it's not a very imaginative name. I'm going to post a link in, and then I'm going to talk about what's at that link. You can all look at it, and I'll also share my screen. Okay, so what this insect is, it is a leafhopper. It's very unremarkable in its appearance. If you can look at my screen, if I do a search for the species name, Dalbulus maitus, you can see these leafhoppers on the screen, and good luck figuring out how that's different than any other leafhopper. It's a large group. There are thousands of species of leafhoppers, and many of them look just like this. You can see it ranges from off-white to green and translucent. So this is just a long way of saying site IDing these is not the way to go. So there is this crop protection network initiative. Darcy is the main contact point for this, where we've set out traps to try to trap the leafhoppers, send them to Oklahoma, where the sort of ground zero of this project is, for identifying this pest. The main reason we worry about this pest is that it's a vector of a disease called corn stunt. The feeding the pest does itself can be a concern, but not likely to be a concern for us in the United States. So we're worried about this corn stunt disease. If you look at that map, you can see we've got a positive detection in Missouri and a positive detection in Kansas, both of them last week basically, and about 10 days ago. So that's why I'm mentioning this now, because that's come up that in the Midwest, not necessarily close to us, but not far either, that they've started finding this pest. So we have 3 locations in Indiana where we're looking for them: Acre, Pinny, and CPAC, 3 of the pack location, or 2 packs into Acre, and we'll see what we get. I would anticipate that other sites will fill in green throughout the country, and then we'll take it from there in terms of determining if they are capable of vectoring the disease, if they have the disease. So this map here doesn't indicate disease. This indicates the insect. The insect, of course, is the precursor to the disease. So I wanted to put that on everyone's radar, just FYI at this point. Like I said, it's nothing that we can identify by sight. If you go into a corn or soybean field, or really any field, you'll see some leaf hoppers. In all likelihood, they are not this leaf hopper, even though they may look like it. But that's all about all I wanted to say. If you have questions about the disease, Darcy can answer those. I just wanted to make you aware that the insect is being monitored for and is here in the United States. And as the crow flies, not too far from Indiana.
Christian, a question for me. Does this leafhopper ride the winds like our
Yes, it does.
Okay.
Yes, it does.
So it's likely we've got it forever now.
Oh yeah, I don't think it's gonna decide to shut her down and go back to Mexico or anything like that. No, it's gonna be here. The question will be this disease aspect, right? It has to pick up the disease and in order to vector it around. That will be the part that's a little more difficult to predict than the movement of the insect itself. So not every insect is a vector. They're capable, but not every one of them can and will carry it. But yeah, we're gonna hear about this insect in the future, and they usually don't depart once they get here.
Thank you.
I can add one note to that, is that we did confirm corn stunt, that is the which is the disease we're monitoring last year in one field in Indiana. So we did document one time last year. It blew all the way up. So actually they found a lot up in New York when I was home visiting. I had heard about that. So the vector had moved. So that's what we're doing, is we'll send the samples off and they'll see if they can find the spiroplasma is one of the things that are infecting the vector. So we are tracking that. And then the side note is corn is most susceptible at the younger growth stages. So that's where the fields would be most susceptible, is if we had a replant area with the leaf hopper, and then a positive leaf hopper with the pathogen. So that's kind of what we're trying to track. That's where, I guess in Oklahoma, they had issues last year in their late planted corn, is where they saw the most issues that developed from this disease.
Thank you, Darcy. That reminds me, one more thing I was going to say in relation to that early planted corn issue. This insect can't overwinter here. So that's in our favor when you talk about early planted corn being susceptible and the worry about will they set up shop here and overwinter here. No, that their overwintering tolerances are well above what even our current Indiana winters would offer. So they would freeze out every year and have to, migrate their way back up north. And how far they have to migrate is going to get, of course, less and less. That distance is going to decrease, but they can't overwinter here.
Thank you, Christian. Moving on, we'll talk to John Bonkowski about what's going on at PPDL.
Hello, everyone. We haven't had too many field crop samples. They're very odd and niche cases. So the few things that we've been seeing outside of herbicide injury has been continued root rot issues. So with soybeans, we've had 1 or 2 SDS samples, but the majority of them are still Phytophthora. So once again, keep an eye out for typical Phytophthora symptoms: root rot, kind of a gray black discoloration moving up from the soil line, up the stem. But just also as a reminder, with all these little patches like Darcy had mentioned with root rot, or even like SDS popping up, SDS symptoms usually don't develop until midsummer. In the foliage, we often see just generalized discoloration or kind of chlorosis, especially early on. When you look at the roots, they look severely affected, they're stunted, they are rotting, but you're not seeing that interveinal chlorosis and necrosis until a little bit later as the plant matures. Always look inside the stem. So while we have these external symptoms, cut the stem in half and look for potential disease symptoms inside. With SDS, we often see discoloration inside the vascular tissue, but we also have brown stem rot, which I haven't been seeing as much of in, I would say, in the last 2 years, although it still exists, and maybe it's because people are identifying it out in the field as opposed to sending it in. But typically the pith inside of the stem, so the very, very center of the soybean stem, turns brown and somewhat chambered with brown stem rot. If you're unsure of these kinds of symptoms, I can find some photos for you online. We do have, as everybody's been bringing up, Crop Protection Network. That website has a lot of great photos for these different disease problems. So you can always search in there under their encyclopedia for some of these somewhat common disease issues. Just another thing, kind of bring back to something I mentioned previously, as well as what Dan mentioned earlier on, is that if we have a compromised root system, we are going to be affected by drought conditions much more heavily. And so these root rots are leading to stressed plants. And if they don't have a really large root system or a wide root system, the droughts just can lead to them going downhill, right? So if you are seeing wilting, and if it doesn't seem like it's necessarily just like if it's a whole field thing, or if it might be due to soil texture or lack of rainfall in general, there might be some root issues there, and I'd recommend pulling up some plants to look at the roots. That is it. I have not seen any SCN just yet, but I expect to get a few more samples with some of that problem in the near future. Once again, we don't do nematode testing or nematode counts. We usually recommend sending on to either MSU or the SCN lab and nematode lab at Mizzou. If you have not recommended that to anybody, I can also find that information for you as well.
Thank you, John. Any questions for John? Looks like our final specialist of the day will be Joe Bocovitz with our Indiana State Chemist Office. You have an update for us, John? Joe?
I do. Good morning. As you might guess, drift complaints tend to lag the actual applications being made out there. So we seem to have not peaked yet regarding drift complaints. We still had 13 last week. We also had our first aerial application drift complaint come in the beginning of this week. So I always hold my breath when Darcy starts talking, and it sounds like we may be headed into some diseases that's going to make the airplanes and drones fly. Another thing worth noting is I think I saw that we have 240 or so aerial application companies in Indiana now. And by far, most of them are drone companies now, not companies that fly planes. Where all this is going to shake out, are drones actually going to take over? I don't know. I'm not sure anybody does, but it is worth noting that there's a lot more drone companies out there now than there are companies that fly actual airplanes.
I guess that's our show for today. Our next program will be on August the 5th. So take care, everyone, and hope everybody who is still facing fairs has a good week. Take care.